Hello world, it's KYIV NOT KIEV, Ambassadorial Season 2.0, presented by Tatiana Hajduk and Polina Ivanishin.
Today we have a very great partner who will help us in debunking the myths of the Russian propaganda. This is Ambassador of Canada to Ukraine, Miss Larisa Galadza. Thank you very much for spending some time with us here today.
Thanks for coming to see me.
Since we've last seen each other, the situation in Ukraine have changed dramatically. Russia has started war against our country. How does it feel to be in Ukraine at wartime?
I would start by saying that it is a privilege to be Canada's ambassador to Ukraine at any time, but to be here now, it's particularly so. And so, to be present to Ukrainians when they are experiencing blackouts, when government ministers are making big decisions, when the rockets are flying overhead, I think it shows just how closely not just Canada but all of Ukraine's partners are standing with Ukraine, and so being here is a real privilege.
At war, truth is the first casualty. So Russia is trying to build a whole wall of lies around Ukraine to weaken the support of our international partners and of Canada. And of course, we are here today to debunk some of the Russian myths. So what is the most stupid thing that you have heard about Ukraine in the Russian propaganda?
I think the most stupid thing is that this is something that Ukrainians wanted. That this is in somebody's imagination, that there's a universe in which Ukrainians would vote in a referendum to say, yes, we want to be a part of Russia. That Ukrainians felt that they needed saving from Russia because they are maybe they're Russian speakers in Ukraine. That was just so far away from reality that it's hard to imagine someone actually thought that was the truth. But of course, I don't think Russia thinks that's the truth. I think they just put that out there so that other people in the world who may not know Ukraine and Ukrainians feel that this is a war they shouldn't get involved in.
On top of Russian lies is also there are statements that Russia does not fight civilians in Ukraine and only destroys military targets. What evidence of terror against civilians did you witness?
I've been to Irpin, I've been to Borodyanka, I've been to the villages outside of Bucha, and I have seen the destroyed apartment blocks, the destroyed homes. I've seen the minefields in the farmers' fields, the mines laid in the farmers' fields. I've spent time in the cold and the dark when the electricity grid has been hit. None of these things are military targets. The Stara Babtya that I was speaking with last week in the village, 4 buildings she had on her property, and she said 1, 2, 3, 4 gone. She said direct hits on those buildings. How is that not a direct attack on civilians? I saw it the other day in Chernivtsi, again outside of the city. We were preparing for a visit. The siren goes off. We say, okay, well, we better go to Ukrytya, and we're walking along, and all these children come out of a building, out of their school, and they're walking in a straight line with their backpacks and their hats and their jackets and everything. And if this was a scene anywhere else, you would think that these children were going to the bus, for the bus to take them home. Like if it was in Canada, those kids are they're walking to the bus. No, they were walking to the shelter. Those children shouldn't be going to the shelter, but they're going there because the attacks are on civilian targets, and those children could end up underneath some rubble.
I was among the luckiest people who decided on the 24th of February that it's safer to be not in Kyiv but in Irpin. So we went there on the first day and spent the first 10 days of the invasion there. So I completely understand what you're speaking about, and I was there, and our home was partially destroyed. But my question is, what do you want to do when you see these things with the buildings of Stara Babcia, with the children who are going to the shelter, with the buildings of so many people from Kyiv and from all around Ukraine, in Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel, and all around Ukraine? What do you want to do when you see this?
I guess the first thing I want to do is to reach out and say, I'm sorry, and we're here. The second thing that I want to do then is make sure that in Ottawa, people making decisions, politicians, senior officials making decisions, have the best information possible about what the needs are here, and what's being experienced, what's happening, what kinds of plans are getting put together, what the needs are for tomorrow, but also for 6 months from now. So I want to do a better job of my work as a Canadian diplomat reporting back, to make sure they have the information that they need to help shape those decisions, so that the assistance that we provide to Ukrainians is relevant and timely, and continues to show our support and helps win the war.
What are the personal stories of war victims that impressed you the most?
I met a woman. I guess in any story, what impresses me is the ability to keep going, the determination to keep going. The other day I met a woman, Irina, outside of Chernivtsi city, and she's from Donetsk, and she explained to me her story. She was a woman, a city woman in Donetsk. When Russia invaded in 2014, she moved into the gray zone, further away from the city, into the village, and there she had to remake her life. She said, I wasn't a village person, I was a city person. I had to learn to live in the village. And she got a grant through one of our development programs that works on economic empowerment for women. So she got a grant to buy a sewing machine, to buy some chickens and some ducks, to plant some porichka bushes, so step by step was able to rebuild her life and have a good life. Russia invaded again, and destroyed what she had. She was hiding from the rockets, but it hit them, killed the friend of hers who was with her, injured her very, very badly. She managed to escape somehow. She managed to get herself to a hospital, major surgery on her leg, spent 4 months convalescing, made her way to Chernivtsi, and there she is, and she's thinking, what's the next grant that she's going to get? And not only that, she's sitting there with a room of other people who've never done grants before, but who have never filed or applied for grants. She wants to help them.
Can Russia's actions against the Ukrainian people be classified as genocide from your point of view?
I think Russia's words can be classified as genocide. You don't need the Putin was so clear that Ukraine and Ukrainians don't have a right to exist. So my personal view is yes, absolutely.
It's terrible, but the calls to exterminate Ukrainians were voiced not only by Putin and his propagandists, but also by ordinary Russians. How to achieve a stable peace when a neighboring nation demands your physical destruction?
It's a very good question, and I think that's, it's one thing to have to recover from a war and figure out how you're going to live with your neighbor when it's their government who has, made these decisions against the will of the people. But I think that you're right. There's plenty of evidence that the people aren't standing up. The Russian people aren't standing up to their government and saying, no, these are our brothers and sisters. There will be a sustainable peace because Ukraine will have everything that it needs to defend itself, I think. I mean, this is part of President Zelensky's plan. the sustainable peace will be as a result of a security in Ukraine that comes from a modern and well-armed, well-prepared, well-exercised military and military infrastructure. It will come from a totally independent media space, a totally independent political space. It will come from energy independence. It will come from integration, membership in the European Union. It will come from strong interoperability with NATO and ultimately, I still believe, membership. And it will come from the people of Ukraine who say, we will never let this happen again. The Ukrainian armed forces are showing the West what they're made of, what they're capable of doing. They are going to be, they are the most experienced Western military. There's no going back from that. The weapons that are now being used here are modern, sophisticated weapons. And Ukrainians are learning how to use them very, very, very quickly. Not only that, they're being tested, they're being used, and then they're going to be refined. They're going to be made even better. And I would say that a lot of the success that the Ukrainian armed forces are having is as a result of huge work that was done in the previous 8 years to develop a modern army, to reform the defense and security infrastructure of this country. And I think one of the most obvious places where that happened, that was taking place, it happened and it worked, is in leadership. And how the Ukrainian armed forces had adopted Western-style leadership, where you put the decisions about how to fight down to the lowest level, as opposed to a very strong vertical where you just carry out orders.
Yeah, we have a joke that Ukrainian armed forces joined NATO before Ukraine did. They are already there.
You have mentioned that you spent some time in the dark and without heat. So this is about the energy terror. Do you think that this energy terror of Russia is a part of some larger plan to conquer Ukraine?
I think that one of the ways to win is for Russia to win, they think, is to break the will of the people. And they think that Ukrainians' will can be broken by making sure they're cold, in the dark, in the dead of winter, and unable to go about their lives. So that's a major miscalculation on the part of Russia. The latest in many miscalculations that they've made about Ukrainians. How's Canada helping in so many different ways? We know what it means to live in a cold country, and we've got good equipment for that. Starting with the basics of the we call them long johns, the undergarments that will keep the Ukrainian armed forces warm on the front lines. A few months ago, we announced that we were sending 500,000 pieces of winter clothing to the Ukrainian armed forces. So that's very basic. If your soldiers can't fight, then they're warm, and they have that contribution from Canada and from many other countries. We're also, with our humanitarian support, providing additional equipment that's needed, not just blankets and mattresses, more of those things, but generators. A couple weeks ago was another $10 million worth of funding that will buy about 800 generators for humanitarian purposes. Yesterday, another announcement of $115 million. This is another one of our sort of our creative things I think that Canada has done on the financial front. when the war started and Canada removed a special status for Russian and Belarusian imports to Canada, which allowed them to trade with us with low tariffs, removed that, suddenly everything coming, all the products, imports from Russia and Belarus had a 35% tariff on them. And Canada decided that we would collect all those tariffs and give them to Ukraine to help with the war efforts. So yesterday, the figure was revealed. It's $115 million, and it's going into a World Bank, I believe, World Bank fund that is helping to restore Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
It sounds like a Robin Hood thing.
That's right. Take from the rich and give to those who need it.
Russia has chosen to weaponize food and energy. Thus, people in Europe are facing higher energy prices, while people in Africa are at risk of malnutrition, because both Ukraine and Russia remain exporters of grain to the region. How is Canada contributing to global food and energy security that was literally shaken by Russia's war in Ukraine?
On food insecurity, this was a growing problem even before Russia's invasion, but Russia really capitalized on it, as you've said, to peddle a narrative that that it's sanctions that are causing the global food security crisis. So I think, I know Canada was very quick off the mark to battle this particular piece of disinformation and also to address the practical realities. First, we incorporated into all of our diplomatic and political engagements the facts of the matter, that that sanctions did not target food, did not target agricultural products, did not target fertilizer, that this was entirely made up by Russia. Secondly, we made it clear that Russia is in fact mining Ukraine's fields and destroying grain storage facilities and holding Ukrainian grain hostage in ports that were also mined. So we again fought that Russian fiction with the facts of the matter in the countries that were affected by the interruption in the supply chain. And Canada provided over $600 million to address to buy additional food for vulnerable countries. But with the G7 altogether, over $4.5 billion worth of financial support to mitigate the impact of the food crisis caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
After the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, Russia tried to do it again with the Ukrainian territories of the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. People were voting at the gun, and Russia considered this to be a manifestation of the people's will. What is wrong with their statement, and how can we explain this to the people in the world who are not so in the context?
There's no universe again in which those sham referendums were legitimate. I don't know who pays attention to the results of those. In the end, nothing has changed about Western support other than it got stronger. Nothing has changed about how Ukrainians are regarding their territory. Nothing has changed about how the UN General Assembly talks about Ukrainian territory or this war. There are countries in the world that may not have all of the information they need in order to step out confidently and materially and practically in support of Ukraine. And so this is something that Canada has been doing all over the world, is making sure that all the Canadian ambassadors like me have good information about what's going on here. That's a big diplomatic effort on the part of Canada and on the part of Ukraine's closest friends to make sure that all of these stupid narratives, lies, are countered and called out.
I'm afraid that you diplomats, well-informed people, are competing in this informational field with people like Elon Musk, who just tweets that was a result of a popular will, and millions people worldwide just believe it because they are too lazy to dig deeper. So let's just believe that the referendums are the result of a popular will. So who knows what is going on at the Ukraine? So no, maybe Russians are right.
Well, this is part of the disinformation ploy, though, right? Is to confuse people so much that say, well, who knows? And then you get apathy, and you get disengagement, and you get people stopping trying to understand what's going on in the world. When you say, who knows, or when you say we may never know the truth, you are falling 100% victim to Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and you're letting them win. We must always say we will find out the truth. We must always say these are the facts. We must always try to disperse the gray to make reality clear, however we can do that. Is it personal stories? Is it speeches in parliaments? Is it fact-finding missions from the UN? Is it the cases that are put together by the International Criminal Court? We mustn't say who knows. We mustn't ever say it's hard to know the truth, because that's exactly what Russia wants.
What should the example of the occupied Kherson teach Russia? Just when the Russian troops got away from Kherson, it became very clear that Kherson has never been Russian and never wanted to be Russian. So yeah, as soon as your troops are in the city, you can claim that it's your territory and all the people who live there support Russia. But just the very next day your troops are out, there is no Russia in Kherson, and never was.
When Russia occupied Kherson, there was electricity and there was no shelling. Russia left, suddenly there's no electricity, there's shelling, and the Ukrainians are glad that Russia's gone. You know, the whole without water, without electricity, without Russia. So I think that I'm not sure that Russia learned anything. I'm sure they knew when they were there that these people didn't support them. I think that it's just another lesson to countries in the world or people in the world who thought that maybe there was still something to the idea that a southern Russian, largely Russian-speaking city might have been okay. Kind of doesn't care whether it's in Ukraine or in Russia. It clearly cares, and would rather be in a Ukraine that is dark and cold and under fire than in a part of a repressive totalitarian Russia.
What should be the punishment for Russia's actions for such a gross violation of international law and in particular of the UN Charter?
The punishment should be the punishment that we have systems to mete out, which is accountability, jail time, and reparations. They have violated international law. They've violated the UN Charter. They've violated human rights. So we need to the world and Ukraine and the Ukrainian justice system, the international criminal justice system needs to hold Russia to account, Russians to account, the people who made the decisions to do this, the people who gave the orders to perpetrate the atrocities, the people who perpetrated the atrocities from top to bottom and right back up again.
The unity of world democracies around Ukraine is very annoying to Russia because its political goals in Ukraine have failed, its efforts on the battlefield have turned into failures. So Russia is now trying to manipulate public opinion to create doubts about constant military aid to Ukraine from the part of its allies. Like NATO countries have exhausted their stockpiles of weapons and won't be able to help Ukraine forever, so forget about that. So that's the narrative, that the Western allies will not be able to help Ukraine forever, as long as it takes, till the very victory. So I'd like us to debunk this one, this myth. But let me start with the question, what is the Canadian contribution to Ukraine's future victory that you're most proud of?
So this long list of all the things that Canada has provided, and maybe on your show you can have it like running across the bottom.
We'll do that.
Because it has been, since the very beginning, everything from lethal aid, cameras for the Bayraktar drones, UAVs, rifles, howitzers, like I said before, long underwear that keep people warm, food rations, blankets. It goes on and on. Plus about $2.5 billion worth of financial support to stabilize the economy. The contribution that I think I will be most proud of is the contribution that we make to regular people who see a need and because of resources that we provide can fill the need. So we had a lot of development programs working in Ukraine until the invasion, and they were working with with women, with vulnerable populations, with judges, with police across the country, in Donbass, but also sort of everywhere. We were supporting civil society organizations, and when the invasion happened, we immediately said, the money that you have from our projects, you can use it however you need to use it right now, to save lives, to get people out, to buy things, and not only did we say they could use the money they had, we also gave more money to these projects, especially projects working with vulnerable populations. We also provided additional funding for farmers who wanted to do what farmers do, which is harvest their crops, but had nowhere to put it, and we provided funding for grain storage equipment because they didn't have it. All of these little things that allowed people who had a need and who could contribute to the survivability of their community or their to their community and their people and their country, where we were able to provide resources that help them do that. I'm super proud of that.
How is Canada's defense industry changing in a world where in this new reality where the guns are again ruling the political decisions?
I think that around the world, the military-industrial complex is figuring out what to do with this. I think countries, governments are figuring out how they are going to, how they need to change their own systems of procurement and planning, what level of militarization is needed, and that is absolutely a partnership between the military-industrial complexes in our countries and the governments that make the decisions on what they buy and how much to spend and where they're going to get it from and the rest of it. So I haven't seen a huge change yet, but it is absolutely it's a very relevant actual thing that's happening right now. Are these discussions? They're important for us, as countries that need to defend ourselves, for us as allies that may need to help defend an allied country and be part of NATO. And of course, we know that it's relevant for Ukraine today and for its forever future.
You're a well-informed participant of G7 ambassadors meetings in Ukraine. How strong is the commitment to support Ukraine among G7? I shouldn't be asking this question.
Why not? I mean, I just look at this leader's statement. Look at the leader's statement from Monday, from the summit, the G7 summit. I don't think it could be stronger. I mean, it is unequivocal in its support for Ukraine. And it's clear that of all of the mechanisms and tables and multilateral fora and groupings that are important to Ukraine in this fight, the G7 is, I think, tops. There you have a group of countries that for years has been bought into Ukraine's success and on the reform side, and that's why the G7 ambassador is so active here. But you also have the economic strength to support Ukraine and also to choke off Russia. You have there the countries that are doing the most on sanctions. Canada has put sanctions on almost 1,600 entities and individuals. That's since the invasion. 1,600 entities and individuals have been sanctioned by Canada alone. Then you add the United States to that. You add the EU to that. You add the UK to that. You add Australia to that. And you have a strong constriction of Russia's economic power, and Russia's not telling the full story of just how much those sanctions are hurting. We know that they are having an effect.
So the next and probably the last myth that we want to debunk is that Ukrainians do not want peace and are prolonging the war. Do you see any signs that the Russians are looking for peace talks right now?
No. None at all. I mean, Putin just the other day said he's not even going to let up on the attacks or on the war over the Christmas period. He's trying to convince his friends in the world that Ukraine doesn't want peace. It's hard to believe, but there are still people in the world. There are still countries in the world who think that Ukraine is prolonging this fight. So again, you're absolutely right. It's a piece of disinformation, and I think collectively, Ukraine and its partners are doing everything they can to fight that narrative.
Why is it so important to stop Russia now, and to not pass this war on to our children?
Ukrainians have been have lived for centuries under Russian domination, terror, rule, influence, meddling, various types, and for so much of its history, just continued to pass that on to their children. I think that now you get this feeling, sitting here, talking to all kinds of people, that Ukrainians are just saying, enough. As a grandchild of people who left Ukraine because of Russian aggression, I know and I have seen firsthand what is passed on between generations. And I think that we know enough now also about intergenerational trauma. And on the flip side, we know Ukrainians know enough about what it means to live with freedom, not peace, but freedom, that they aren't going to go back. And that collective enough is so strong that it will lead to that ultimate routing of Russia from Ukraine, not just physically, militarily, but also out of its political systems, out of its energy supply systems, out of its economic systems, so that Ukraine has that independence. And so why do it now? Why is it important to do now? Because it's possible to do now. Because it's possible.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. There are a lot of people from Canada among the KYIV Not Kiev audience. I'm not afraid to say that it's our core audience.
That's great.
Is there something you would like to tell them?
I think I would tell them that I am every day, every single day, I am asked to pass thanks on to Canadians. Every single day. Ukrainians from the Babcia to the officials at the highest level are grateful. And they tell us that they feel the presence of Canada and Canadians. So I would say to Canadians, keep the support coming. There is no such thing as support that is too small. And I hear that from Ukrainians all the time. And I wish that more Canadians could be around me to hear the heartfelt thanks, to hear what a difference even the little things make to their ability to get up in the cold and the dark and keep fighting.
We thank you, Madam Ambassador. We thank all the subscribers of KYIV Not Kiev and all the friends in Canada. These were Larisa Galadza, Ambassador of Canada to Ukraine. These were Polina Ivanishin and Tetiana Hajduk. Thank you very much for watching us today. Thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you.